So,
Others,
I was just going to ask:
it's just
is your
others
modeling forecasting more of the same coming? That in fact this is going to escalate into bigger areas. Maybe China gets into Taiwan. That's another story, I know. But the escalation in the Mideast, escalation, of what's going on in Ukraine.
look, you have basically these people, and it's mostly Anthony Blinken in the White House, the State Department. He's threatening China that if you help Russia, we'll put the same sanctions on you. Then you have North Korea saying they're ready to attack the South. You have Iran against Israel. I mean, honestly, Napoleon lost because he had two fronts. We have four if you're going to do this. I mean, honestly, if I was the opposite, on the opposing side, I would coordinate all four attacks together. How's the West going to even handle that? I mean, these people are dangerous. They are trying to orchestrate a war before Trump even gets in. And if you pick up the rug and look a little bit, they're afraid that Trump's going to win and would shut them down, as has done routinely. He fired, John Bolton, who would, I think, invade Canada to get to Russians, and basically what you have here is they have, they're creating an alternative. They make sure war happens.
It's always a special time when I get a chance to talk to Martin Armstrong, one of the best known economic forecasters in the world. I always go back to this, that the Wall Street Journal call him the highest paid economist in the world, or forecaster in the world. And that's because he has a magnificent track record, always controversial. He always talks about things according to his model. The Socrates model was in the field of artificial intelligence 10 years before most people even heard about that term. But he's here today, really happy. He's got a big conference coming up, by the way, down in Orlando, Florida, November 8th, 9th, and 10th. You can attend in person, but you can also go online, which thousands of people do, as more than thousands, tens of thousands of people look at his daily blog at armstrongeconomics.com. Marty, thanks for finding time for us.
Oh, it's always a pleasure, Mike.
There's so much, because you are the pioneer in looking at global events and the impact drilling down into individual markets, for example. You were talking capital flows. I literally think before people understood what that was, certainly governments didn't. You advised the Reagan administration, for example. I'm going back now to, I think, 87 off the top of my head, saying, hey, if you do this, be careful, because the Japanese money is going to do this. Well, that's a little more appreciated to this day, but you're still the pioneer, and I think the leading exponent of looking at how capital moves. And you're talking about a world right now with huge geopolitical movements. You've got other reasons to move. So I want to start, there's too much to talk about, so I'll just try and break it down. As I say, you're preparing a 3-day conference on this, for goodness sakes. I'm asking you to do it in just a few minutes, but we can certainly give people a flavor of what's going on. And I want to start geopolitically. And the reason I want to start there is that your model was calling for the kind of tension, the cycle of war, you call it, within your modeling, going back several years. I remember you talking at your conference, the conference I'm alluding to today. I remember you talking about your conference saying, oh, by the way, be careful, because Ukraine's about to erupt. And that was about 4 months later. You were at the World Outlook Conference. I think it was 214, this off the top of my head. 214 said, oh, by the way, as soon as those Sochi Olympics are over, we're going to have tensions in that area again. So I want to get your quick take. What is the cycle of war telling you today? You've been talking about escalation. You were at our World Outlook Conference saying, be careful. This is all escalating. So where are we at?
It's very interesting what's going on. They're actually very much afraid of Trump, mainly because he is anti-war. I had actually gone down to dinner at Trump's Mar-a-Lago in March of 2020. And as you know, I've met many heads of state, but he was actually the first one that impressed me. He said that he wanted to pull the troops out of Afghanistan, but the reason was he was tired of sending letters to their, to a parent to say your son died for God and country. And actually, to quote him back then, he said, "What are we doing there? What are we fighting for? They've been fighting over borders for 1,000 years. What difference are we going to make?" I've also spoken with RFK, and I was pushing him to join with Trump, mainly because he's also anti-war. And what's happening here is you have both. You have a real crisis developing. We have what we call neocons that I think they were psychologically damaged from the 50s, having to hide underneath their desks in fourth grade. For air raids, you're going to die, whatever. And all they ever want to do is is constantly war. You can look on YouTube and Robert McNamara, who was the neocon took us into Vietnam. Before he died, he wanted to clear his conscience, and he said, "Look, we were wrong. We thought Russia was involved, and it was just a civil war." Well, 58,000 Americans died for that mistake. And how many, millions of Vietnamese? The same thing with Afghanistan, the weapons of mass destruction that didn't exist in Iraq. I mean, just go down the list. As many people have said, they've never won a single war since World War II. Yet they always are pushing this. And you can probably Google up, you'll see Lindsey Graham, who's one of the founders of this neocon stuff anymore. And he was on Face the Nation a couple months back. And he actually said the truth for once. He slipped and probably didn't realize it, but he said, there is $10 to $12 trillion in natural resources under Crimea, which is a gas field. And he actually said on national TV, we can't allow Russia and China to get that. So I guess, this isn't really about democracy or anything else. It's about money again. And
so
others.
So I was just going to ask, is your
others,
modeling forecasting more of the same coming? That in fact this is going to escalate into bigger areas. Maybe China gets into Taiwan. That's another story, I know. But the escalation in the Mideast, escalation, of what's going on in Ukraine.
Look, you have basically these people, and it's mostly Anthony Blinken in the White House, the State Department. He's threatening China that if you help Russia, we'll put the same sanctions on you. Then you have North Korea saying they're ready to attack the South. You have Iran against Israel. I mean, honestly, Napoleon lost because he had two fronts. We have four if you're going to do this. I mean, honestly, if I was the opposite, on the opposing side, I would coordinate all four attacks together. How's the West going to even handle that? I mean, these people are dangerous. They are trying to orchestrate a war before Trump even gets in. And if you pick up the rug and look a little bit, they're afraid that Trump's going to win and would shut them down, as has done routinely. He fired, John Bolton, who would, I think, invade Canada to get to Russians, and basically what you have here is they have, they're creating an alternative. They make sure war happens. They got NATO trying to raise $100 billion to make sure the war against Russia continues even if Trump is elected. So that shows you what they know what Trump really is about. And they want to keep, funding this. I mean, Europe has told Zelensky, they don't have a problem with him using long-range missiles to go ahead and attack Moscow itself. They want World War III. And the main reason economically is that we're at this debt crisis. Sovereign debt is exceeding $100 trillion globally. They borrow year after year with zero intention of paying anything back. And interest expenditures in the United States will exceed military this year. Look, if you add up all the money that's been spent on wars since World War II, it's just outright, it's the equivalent of about 1/3 of the U.S. national debt. And that's without interest. We're still paying interest on World War II debt. I mean, they never pay off anything. So, unfortunately, what is in the cards here is that they intend to, they want war so that they can default on the debt. And that's what comes out of war. And China's been selling off debt. They started dumping like 53 billion US debt the first quarter. Why? Well, you're threatening China with war. And if they went into war and they hold 10% of the US national debt, guess what? They default on it. They're not going to pay. So these are the real problems you have. Then you have the climate change people who are completely insane, and they want war against Russia because it's the biggest energy producer. Oh, let's shut all that fossil fuel down. And then you have these other people that are saying, gee, if we go in and we take Russia, they're the richest country in the world from natural resources, and then we can pay off all the debts. And I basically said, I don't care what you get out of Russia, you'll never pay off the debt. You'll still spend more anyhow. That's just the way they are. Look, I mean, Aristotle, Plato, Socrates, they were all against direct democracy. They said because the average person's is really too stupid to govern themselves. Well, we're in the same boat. We vote for people that we have, oh, he looks nice, sounds nice, whatever. Does anybody really look? We just vote on labels anymore. 40% of the people that, will vote Democrat, regardless of what Camilla says, just because they're Democrat. They don't pick up the rug to say what, people think that they're actually voting for a person, when in fact you're voting for a party. I mean, I could run for Congress, tell you whatever you want to hear. All right, I'll save the whales. I'll whatever. All right, then I get there. Day one, you go in. Congratulations, glad you're here. Here's how it works. Okay, you then have to vote party line. Motions can only come from a committee. So if you're not a good boy, you don't get on that committee. It's so, and then just look at the votes. They're always down party line. Are you really voting for individuals or not?
Let me come back to the sovereign debt, linking it to the escalation of tensions or hostilities, I should have said, not tensions, hostilities. And, the implication for the US dollar, I mean, it's all interrelated. That's what your Socrates model talks about. So let's drill down just quickly. Obviously, as I said, you had a 3-day conference coming up that gets much more into depth on this. But just quickly, to me, that would then suggest that, when there's tension in the world, money comes to the US for safety and opportunity, but let's say for safety at this point. So that suggests to me that the strength in the US dollar, well, obviously there's variations on week to week, month to month, but overall the trend is still up in the US dollar then.
Yes. And look, there's a lot of people are confused because you have also the stock market going up, you have gold going up, and you have the dollar hanging in. And like a lot of these people have said, oh, gold up, dollar down. Not necessarily. All right. When you're looking at international geopolitical problems, you have to look at this objectively. U.S. was bankrupt in 1896. World War I and World War II made the U.S. dollar the world reserve because 76% of the world gold reserves came to America. That's what 1929 was about. All the money was here from World War I. All right, it flees. All right, this is what they're also concerned about. World War One. Just look at your history. They closed the share markets in Europe. We go into this an outright, war, which they are desperately trying to create. And look, you can go on even Wikipedia and search Northwood Project. All right. The CIA proposed killing Americans, blaming it on Cuba to justify an invasion. JFK shut it down. These people do not care about you. All right. It's their objective only. And they will say whatever they need to, like weapons of mass destruction that never existed. They will lie all the time. That's just what they do. So they want this. They want this war.
Let me come back to the impact, though, on interest rates, on gold, we're watching these new highs in gold, which your model's been very comfortable with. But, and again, there's always the short term versus longer term. So I'll sort of keep going on the longer term because these are major trends that are impacting. So do you see gold continuing to go up, maybe in a response to geopolitical?
Yes. Look, that's why gold's going up, period. All right. All these people that said, oh, gold goes up because of inflation. Sorry. Gold went down for 19 years from 1980. All right. The national debt quadrupled. Inflation went up. How come gold didn't rise? Gold rises when there's a geopolitical, concern. If you're questioning about the government, even if you go back to 1980, it went from 100 to 400 from 76 into December 79. Went from 400 to 875 in the last 6 weeks, and that's when Russia invaded Afghanistan. All right. You go into, they want to create some sort of a false flag before the election. And maybe that might come even during the week of October 28th. Gold looks like it wants to continue higher into next week, probably trying desperately to test 3,000. If it can get through that area, it can maybe test the 3,200 level. It depends upon what actions they take. All right. But this is what you're looking at. Then you have the Middle East. All right. Many people are very concerned about the Middle East because you have evangelical Christians trying to they think that the second coming, if we attack all this stuff now. The same thing with some of the Jews, and even the Arabs have some of the same prophecies. So many people are worried about, is this Armageddon over there or what? And you have people deliberately trying to create it. So is it? I don't know. If you try and deliberately create something, is that valid? I don't know. But, then you have them threatening North Korea. How are you going to threaten people? All right. Are you going to send troops over there and invade the North? I don't get this. And so they're just out there. Look, Richard Nixon was brilliant. He separated China from Russia. These guys are brain dead, and they brought everybody together. It makes no sense. They have no strategic understanding of history or anything. And to think that they can say, well, China, you wait your turn. We're going to destroy Russia first, and then we'll come after you. They're going to really, okay, we'll patiently wait for you to come after us. Not going to happen.
Let me come back to, you said the share markets are also making new highs. Is that the same phenomena of money pouring into gold? Obviously, it can't go up if it isn't, but pouring into the share market internationally, coming into the U.S. domestic markets?
Yes, the smart money is realizing there is clearly a risk of capital controls. Europe will slap on capital controls as soon as something happens. They're afraid of losing money. All right. And they will put on capital controls. So any smart European that I talk to is already trying to get some money out of Europe just in case. Spread it around, be hedged, because if they slap on capital controls, it's going to be too late to move anything. I'm concerned about gold as well, because these people do know about gold. And I should point out, in 1864, Abraham Lincoln shut down the gold market. And he was arresting any journalist that told the truth. So, governments have a history of this sort of thing. And, we have to keep that in mind. I mean, we'll be going over some of this stuff at the conference, but this is not my opinion. I'm stating historical fact. All right. He basically said, all these people buying gold. The dollar collapsed, went to 9.97 on the British pound. I mean, that's pretty far down. That was 1864. So Lincoln, instead of saying, gee, why is everybody voting against me? He tries to punish them. You just look at California. They want to put in exit tax. Instead of saying, gee, what are we doing wrong that people want to leave? Oh, let's punish them for leaving. This is the way government responds all the time, no matter what the question. They are never wrong. There are no mirrors in government. They always just see us. They never look at themselves. Even when I got called into the Brady Commission, I mean, I fought tooth and nail. I finally got them to admit that it was G5 that caused it. But if you read the end of the report, it says, well, we think maybe currency had something to do with it. That was it. That was the best I could get. They're not going to say, oh, gee, let's see, the G5 lowered the dollar by 40%. So all the foreigners started selling U.S. assets and that caused the crash. They're not going to say it.
Let me come, as I say, we can't handle all of this right now, and remind people that they can go online for the conference at armstrongeconomics.com, and you can just watch the whole 3 days live online there, plus get subject to or receive numerous reports. I never know how Marty does it, actually. He writes so many of them, but you'll get numerous reports because, of course, it is sophisticated, it is complex, and there's so many moving parts at the same time. And I guess people just keep walking away saying, from your conference a year ago, as I say, and 2 years ago, you were outlining the sort of geopolitical hostilities that we were about to endure. And people wonder about things like interest rates. And can you give me just sort of a quick overview of interest rates, the kinds of things you'll look at the conference?
Your long-term rates will go up with war. All right, so you're looking at the 10-year and up. You will see a split, and smart money will be more inclined to be looking at like mortgages, things of that nature. Even in 1980, the split between on the yield curve, the difference was almost 9%. I mean, it was dramatic. You probably remember those days.
Yes.
I mean, these things can be, quite dramatic in their movements. During war, your long-term rates go up. All right. Short-term and the spread between private sector and law and government will basically begin to collapse. So it'll be safer to have debt from General Motors, for example, than the U.S. Treasury at some point. And governments are never really trustworthy. I mean, Italy, for example, when it got in trouble and you had 30-day, 90-day paper, what did they do? Oh, okay, we can't pay that, so we're converting it to 10 years.
Yeah, I remember when Greece did that too. The famous extend and pretend. Pretend you're paying it back, you won't, so just extend it.
Yeah, that's basically, look, they can do whatever they want. I mean, I won't mention the firm, but back in 1987, because the stock market crashed, this one firm showed a picture of all their analysts around the board table and said, we're bullish on bonds. And one of them was a friend of mine. I called him. I said, "What the heck are you doing? Bonds are going down." He told me, "Look, the law department said if they advise people to buy government bonds and they lost money, you say, 'Your Honor, we had full faith and confidence in the U.S. government.' Oh, yes, case dismissed. If you told them to buy IBM and they lost 30%, you should have known." It's just basically the way it goes. So just be careful about the guys that are selling the government bond stuff. We're heading into a sovereign default. Spain has defaulted 7 times. France is in their 5th republic. U.S. defaulted on its continental debt before. I mean, that's why you can buy continental currency on eBay, because they never honored it. And that was in the Constitution, said they would. All right. So Britain defaulted on its World War II debt. I mean, just go down the list. I mean, the only country I ever found that ever did pay something off was the U.S. when Andrew Jackson was there for a brief period, because he was against the banks and shut down the Bank of America, of North America, etc. And Romania. Other than that, everybody else is not. I mean, as simple as that. So that's what we have. So just be mindful that when you're seeing gold rising, the stock market rising, when you look at the stocks and you'll see what made highs first was the Dow. NASDAQ last. Why? The big institutional foreign money, they buy the Dow. Okay? They don't buy the small startups, because if they lost money, the guy's going to lose his career and be fired. If he buys, the Dow, hey, everybody else did. That's, he can't be fired. All right. He's not taking a risk, not sticking his neck out. So just look at that relationship, and you'll see when the Dow is making new highs first, that shows international capital coming in. All right.
Let me ask one final question here, because one of the broad trends that you've been talking about for 40 plus years is this transition from public to private. You've just described half of that. You don't want anything to do with government bonds, as an example of that, and many other. I mean, we could go on and on about that. But does that mean that you're more comfortable in, say, I'll use this. So for right now, quality U.S. stocks, for example, one, because U.S. dollar's still okay. It's not government, and the size may help. So, and foreigners may buy. So am I okay? Is it right to say you're more comfortable with owning stocks as opposed to bonds? Government bonds,
I mean,
pardon me.
You even see some central banks have been buying stock.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, look, Europe is, honestly, it looks like a basket case to me. They have succumbed to the climate change people, which have really kind of destroyed their economy. And then you have NATO, which is insane. I mean, I've seen the memos before, and NATO was very concerned about losing funding because money was going to climate change. So I actually saw where they were saying, gee, how do we remain relevant? All right. And the only way they remain relevant is constantly beating the war drums. Oh, Russia's going to invade any day now, so you need to give us more money. That's it. And they keep poking the bear as much as they can. Look, Putin is probably the only adult in the room. He understands what is going on. All right. So he has been restrained. The criticism of Putin inside Russia is the opposite side, that he should have invaded Kiev. This war would have been over in 6 weeks. He should have treated Ukraine the same way U.S. did to Iraq. he didn't want to be seen as a invader of that nature. So it was a special operation just to protect the Russians in the Donbass. So that wasn't good enough. So it was the neocons that told Zelensky to invade Russia. They're desperately trying to get Russia to attack anything in NATO so they can call Russia the aggressor and off we go. This is what's going on. Like I said, just look at that Project Northwoods. Hitler did that. He, burned down the Bundestag and to blame it on communism. I mean, they always need something of that nature. Saddam Hussein always gassing his own people. They tried that with Assad in Syria, and Congress refused to follow through with that one. It's always that sort of thing. All right, so Putin has been sitting on his hands. If he is replaced, God help us, because then you're going to get a Russian neocon, and they're going to be just as bad as ours. But Putin knows what's going on. He's offered peace many times, and it's constantly being denied. You have Boris Johnson. There was a peace deal, and Boris Johnson hopped on the plane, ran over, and told Zelensky he wasn't allowed to sign it. I mean, that made the front page in Ukraine. I mean, as you know, I had 2 employees from Ukraine, one in Kiev and one in Donetsk, and basically, when that has taken place, a lot of Ukrainians are very anti-Zelensky. They feel that they don't have the right to decide the fate of their own country. It has to come from Washington, D.C. or London.
Well, what that spells, of course, is that kind of environment that we started off with, that this escalation, this constant, hostilities, impact on sovereign debt, impact on interest rate, impact on, currency flows, all of that, the very things that you'll be talking about at your conference November 8th, 9th, and 10th. As I say, you just go to armstrongeconomics.com, armstrongeconomics.com, just click on events. You can sign up, you can go in person. I don't know if I think it's sold out actually, but you can certainly join online and from the comfort of your home, because there's, as you can see, tons of stuff to talk about. Marty, I appreciate you finding time. I know you're busy. You've got reports to put out. You've got a conference coming up. Please know we always appreciate when you find time for us on Money Talks.
Well, it's always a pleasure to see you, Mike. We've been friends for, 50 years or so?
Yep. But you were 11 at the time. I was already 40. Thanks, Marty.
All right. Thanks a lot.